Hello, and thanks for watching. I'm Rachel Kirkland with WashingtonExec, and I'm excited to introduce Arun Gupta. Arun is a venture capitalist, a lecturer at Stanford University, and an adjunct entrepreneurship professor at Georgetown University. He is also the CEO of NobleReach Foundation, where he works to help the United States remain a leader in technological and scientific innovation. And along with experts Jerry George and Thomas Fewer, Arun recently co-wrote a book called Venture Meets Mission. Arun, thanks for coming on to discuss this book.
Rachel, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Arun, you've described Venture Meets Mission as offering a roadmap to connect mission-driven professionals to roles that combine tech's innovation with government's reach. Give us a quick recap of what the book is about.
So the book is essentially, trying to, paint a vision for how we as a country can solve our big problems, and that we have the tools to do that today. If I look at the superpowers of our country today, they continue to be the talent we create in a higher ed ecosystem, and the innovation we create out of our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the evidence of that is this is where everyone else from around the world comes to do both. The opportunity we have is to align those more deeply around government ambitions to solve larger social problems so that we can take the entrepreneurial energy and innovation we have in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and then tie that to the scale and reach that government has. And in great power competition, I think this is how we as a country really compete going forward versus our adversaries.
Was there a catalyst or something that inspired you to work on Venture Meets Mission?
Yeah, so look, my professional career, Rachel, was as a VC. Started at Carlyle and then spent most of my career at Columbia Capital. And the latter half of my time at Columbia was really investing at this intersection of mission tech and entrepreneurship. And you saw firsthand both the challenges, but also the magic when you could actually successfully bring the entrepreneurial innovation to solve mission-oriented problems. I then And the other piece that you see when you're around entrepreneurs is just there's a level of optimism. When I then moved and started teaching at Georgetown and Stanford, you could feel that same optimism. So the other bastion of optimism are, along with entrepreneurs, are students, especially college students. And what you could feel and see when I was teaching in the classroom was that, especially pre-COVID to post-COVID, was that students we're really going through an introspective journey around like what do they really want to do, as opposed to just kind of going on the career track factory that many career centers put you on. And in that, they were looking for more purposeful work to do and mission-driven work to do. And in many cases, in office hours, we'd be getting in these conversations where, you realize that we had given them a false binary choice with the vernacular we've given them. We've given them for-profit, not-for-profit, private sector, public sector. And many times these students felt like they had to make an artificial choice of like, how do I do good or make money? Part of it was to kind of highlight for them there's an and function, that you can do both. And that there's this world of companies that are, being funded, getting created, that, can allow you to feel like you're doing purposeful things while also, being able to create wealth for yourself. And so I started teaching a class at Stanford on it called Valley Meets Mission at the Stanford and Washington program. And I just saw how students were reacting to it. And many of them started rescinding banking consulting offers to kind of go into this world. And that really led to kind of really thinking about, and, with my co-authors, how do we amplify that story, right? Like how do we get the word out a little bit more so? And so that was really the inspiration. Honestly, when we started writing it, we didn't really know, where this would lead. And we've been pleasantly surprised with the overwhelming interest around the topic, and that I think a lot of people are thinking this way, especially in a generational way.
You mentioned that overwhelming interest. Were there any other surprising or just unexpected discoveries that you made as you were researching and writing this book?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and it might seem obvious, but that, when we chat with folks on the government side, senior government folks, are Republicans and Democrats, when we chatted with senior folks in the private sector, entrepreneurs, and on the tech side, and when we talk to academic, folks, presidents and deans at universities, there was a collective feeling of like, yeah, we should be doing things differently. And so no one really ever really kind of challenged the premise, which I thought was interesting. Like I thought, you would have different silos saying, here's why we can't do it or not. And it speaks to me a little bit about the time and place that we may be in, where people are open to the idea of like, we need to be collaborative and we're all in this together. So that, ironically, I think was a bit of a surprise, because these are very different cultures. Now, I think they speak different languages. So you almost have to translate that they're saying the same thing, but it can sound different, if you're not used to the words that they use and how they think about it. But I think the other surprise was just the general openness, and the level of enthusiasm and interest, as we were chatting with folks that then would be like, this is great. I need you to go talk to these 5 people too. They would really love what you're trying to do here. And so that was, I think that was another surprise in the process.
What are some lessons you took away just from the process of collaborating with your co-authors to get the message of this book across?
Yeah. Look, I think, for myself, I don't profess to be a writer. And, so there was definitely a level of imposter syndrome as one enters into this and someone says, hey, have you thought about writing a bit? It's clearly a very vulnerable process, Rachel, right? Because, it's one thing to say something and then it disappears in the air. It's another thing to put something in writing and it's there. I think as you collaborate, I think part of what I think really worked well here was that we came at this with different experiences. And we may have a shared goal, but, like I come at it from having been in the venture community and teaching, but not, having spent my time in the academic world, and having been interacting with government, but, more in collaboration with some of our portfolio companies and folks of that sort. They came at it with a little bit more of the, an academic mindset. And what we were able to kind of, I think, do well, is be able to bring some frameworks to the table, but do it in a way through storytelling. Because I think, for at least myself, a big part of this was wanting to write something that, a broad base would want to pick up, especially the younger generation, right? And I think they get inspired more through stories, than they do, frameworks and matrices. And so we try to integrate that. And so, I think we learned a little bit about that, of how to collaborate and create one shared voice in the process.
Can you talk more about the target audience for this book and what you really hope your audience does after reading it?
Yeah, this is one we really struggled with at the beginning, and everyone kept asking, like, well, who is the target audience? And I'll be honest, the answer, I was probably the most resistant. It was like I kind of wanted to be a broad-based audience. So there's, multiple target audiences. The first is young professionals, students starting their careers, folks that are, just beginning their careers already, and just to kind of, a few things, have them embrace a sense of a nonlinear career, have them think about how to intertwine purpose and meaning in their career early on, and then showing them pathways of how people have done that, right? And models. So it's not just theory, but, here's what people have done. So that's one group. I think the other is entrepreneurs, people building companies. And, when I say entrepreneurs, I mean the entrepreneurial community that includes people investing in these, venture folks, et cetera. And really trying to appreciate, what government can bring to the table, and how we can, how we can use them as a way to collaborate, and how, frankly, we have in the past. And that's why we highlight the story of like SpaceX and other companies that are now wildly successful, but they really started it, with government funding, and those are important stories to get out there and remind people of. We there's another audience of that we're really seeing right now, which are people in academia and faculty that are really looking at trying to create curriculum around these intersectional careers, and how do you do that? And again, examples of it, and how to make that work. And we've had a couple of we now have over 15 universities that have wanted to collaborate on the book with us. Some are already starting to create curriculum. I think Princeton has a class that is now using this as a mandatory reading. And all of this is kind of happening kind of word of mouth right now. But I think it speaks to there's people are in search for that optimism. And I think the final bucket are really folks in the government, right? People that are doing great work. They're trying to do their best, whether it be in the military or energy or transportation or pick your agency, health. I think for them, it's also about not only trying to restore a level of respect for the work that they do, but also how they can play in this ecosystem of venture and how their experiences and talents are needed for us. And so we've seen a lot of interest from that community as well.
Arun, any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I guess my only closing thought here, Rachel, is one, first, thank you for having me join you today. I greatly appreciate it and the time. We are. My closing thought is around optimism, right? It is, there's a lot of things in the news and et cetera where people are pessimistic about what's going on, et cetera. And I think if you peel it back, we try to write the book this way, and like what we're doing at NobleReach and with our foundation is around I think there's a lot of optimism around. There's a generational opportunity here to really pull together and create a renewed partnership between government and entrepreneurs to go solve big problems. And I honestly believe there hasn't been a time where you can mobilize capital around people, purpose, and profit like you can today. We've have early success stories. Those early success stories are bringing more capital into the system. You bring more capital into the system, you see better entrepreneurs come into the system. Better entrepreneurs come into the system, the ecosystem gets stronger, and the ecosystem gets stronger, and you see more wins. And look, that's the story of the Valley, and that's the early virtuous cycle I think we're on right now. And so, I think what we're hopefully trying to do is just raise awareness for what we think could be a really meaningful place for people to be spending their careers and building great companies while also solving larger social problems.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Rachel, for having me.